Hey folks, this is Riker with a video on the latest quarterly update for Diablo 4, and it's a doozy. This is the big finale, the grand finale of 2021. We got some juicy, crunchy updates on game systems, as well as some really cool VFX updates. Now, as you read through this is not my first impression. I've already gone through this while streaming. We looked at it together, first impressions on stream. I stream on Twitch Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So the first thing I'm going to point out is this right here is never referenced again. No indication of anything about what it is. We just see this image and it is quite the teaser, and this feels like this is the revised skill tree. We're seeing things in here that appear to be the skills. We're seeing lines that are suggestive of what we were previously seeing within that skill tree. We can put up the old skill tree for comparison. This is what we saw the last time. But nowhere in this update do we get mention or visuals of an updated skill tree, but that does appear to be what we're looking at right now. So I think they snuck in a teaser here of what's to come. Interesting to note that it appears that they've done away with the tree design itself. We now have some kind of carving, some kind of stone type pattern. This almost seems like some kind of demonic skull. Maybe it's even Lilith's head, who knows, but looking forward to learning more about that in the future. So this update here covers itemization and Paragon updates and visual effects in Diablo 4. Worthy to note here is the team is currently playtesting an internal release of the game that represents a significant milestone. So development of Diablo 4 seems to be going along very well. I'm always asked, when do I think this game's going to release? If I had to guess, I would say 2023, but that's just a guess. So we kick off with the itemization of Diablo 4. It's been a while since we got an update on itemization. We get a few more details here. This part written by the new lead systems designer, Joe Pipiora. So first off, plus skill rank affixes, as in Diablo 2, are returning. As players invest points in skills, they grow in potency, and finding items with plus skill rank can speed that along. As a bonus, when the player equips an item with plus skill rank for a skill they haven't learned, they will have access to that new ability. It's a great way to try out new skills before you're able to invest in them. Getting a lucky drop that nets you a skill you'd like for your build 10 levels before you would otherwise have access to it is a huge boost. So, a couple things to unpack here. Overall, first off, first impressions are great. This is reaffirmation that skills are things you can put skill points into to increase the power of the skill. We will have gear that can have +2 skill ranks, and being able to get gear with +2 skill ranks in a skill that you don't have gives you access to using that skill. Is very interesting. It's the way things worked in Diablo 2, but I find it very noteworthy that they're highlighting this. It's a great way to try out new skills before you're able to invest in them. Now, I can't remember if I have a video about this or if I discussed this on stream, as we have a lot of discussions on stream about this stuff, but on the topic of respecialization, one of my major thinking points when it comes to respecialization, to have it or to not, or how easy to make respec or how not easy to make it, comes down to player regret. And we want to be able to minimize player regret, or at least regret that comes from places that we feel that we don't have control over. For instance, let's say you have a skill called Twister. The devs have a nice write-up of what it does. They give you the damage ranges, they give you the mana cost. So you make, as a player, the best educated guess that you can make, or the best decision that you can make about whether you want to take the skill or not. You take the skill, you invest that skill point, it's locked in. Imagine a game with no respec, and then you cast the skill only to find out that it twists about in a weird pattern that makes it very difficult to aim, and you weren't given this information ahead of time. You weren't given an ability to try out the skill ahead of time, so now you have regret on investing the skill point without any easy way to respecialize. In my opinion, these are the things that we want to avoid happening. So having a game with free respec, for instance, is one way to ensure that doesn't happen. But I'd always ask the question, is there another way that we can avoid this regret without having to touch respec or non-respec at all? And bam, as though it were the answer to my prayers, here we have a system where, yes, you can try out skills because you get an item that gives you that skill to try out, and then if you realize, I like this skill, you can then invest the skill points. And what we have here as a noteworthy difference to Diablo 2 is that in Diablo 2, items that rolled with plus skills tended to be, at least plus to a specific skill, tended to be on the class-specific items. Outside of wands and staves, if you had an item that gave you plus to a barbarian skill, it was an item that only barbarians could equip. Here we have a magic two-handed axe that happens to roll with either this is for barbarians or this is for druids, plus 4 ranks to flay. And this is just a magic item, so it's suggesting that a lot more items will be able to roll with these plus to skill rank affixes. Also noteworthy is that they stated that you can get access to a skill 10 levels before you otherwise would have. So that's another interesting consideration. That implies there's going to be some form of stratigraphy in how we unlock skills, and that items are a means of bypassing that. Now, I know a lot of people are pointing at the big damage stats on the weapons. We'll cover that, but first, let's take note of we are seeing more information here. When we first saw items for Diablo 4, we basically just had an attack value, right? Now we're getting damage per second, we're getting the damage range, we're getting the attacks per second, and we get a clarification on whether that's slow or fast, right? So this is a victory here. We've gotten more information. We still have those implicit properties, this 17.2% critical strike damage. This, because it's above the fold here, this is an implicit property of an axe. So, axes are slashing weapons. Again, what is the difference between a two-handed axe and a two-handed mace? I want there to be some difference, right? I don't want it to just be the art that differs. We're getting a bunch of differences now. Slashing, so we're introducing the concept of damage types on physical weapons. So, slashing, there's probably going to be piercing and bludgeoning would be my guess, because it's Dungeons and Dragons style, and presumably there might be either powers or other affixes that will modify or operate off damage types. So there's the slashing, there's the attack speed, and there is the implicit property for an axe, it appears to be. Crit strike damage. For a mace, maybe it's going to be stun chance, i.e. all maces implicitly have stun chance. So we're getting weapon identity. This is a victory. Then, because this is a magic item, magic items roll with 2 properties, plus 4 ranks to flay, and hit effect 13.2% slow chance. As a reminder, the difference between magic items and others is that magic items only have 2 magic affixes, but they could potentially roll higher than a rare or a legendary. Now we also see here requires level 44. Last we checked, level 40 was the max level in Diablo 4. That was a long time ago. We didn't hear any updated information on that. So now we know that is no longer the case. We don't yet know what the new max level is, but we know it's at least 44. Then, of course, we come down to the damage numbers. So we're at level 44, and we already have weapons that are dealing 2,500 damage per second. I see a lot of feedback from the community that these numbers are too high, and I think what I would really like to hear or understand from the devs is the philosophy on why are we seeing these numbers. I personally don't really mind the big numbers, as long as in the midst of combat we're not getting to the point that the numbers we're seeing are ridiculous. I.e., in Diablo 3, we're getting trillions to quadrillions of damage, so much that the numbers have lost all meaning, because I cannot process what 80 trillion damage means. The numbers get to a point where at some point it's just like, okay, well, it's just big number damage. But as long as we're not getting all the insane multipliers that we have in Diablo 3, which does not appear to be the case, and we're not getting to that point, then things still seem like they will be reasonable. But nonetheless, I'm wondering, okay, why is this 2,500 damage per second and not 250 damage per second, for argument's sake? So I would just like to see the devs explain the philosophy on that so that we can then better understand and then perhaps rebut why lower numbers might be better. Because right now the only motivating factor I can see to having these numbers be so big is that at level 1, maybe weapons are doing 10 damage, and so it's because the devs really want to have this ramp up in power curve, right? In general, the absolute value of the damage numbers don't matter as much as the relative difference. So over the course of 40 levels, if your weapon damage is increasing by a factor of 1,000, then that's a lot different than if at level 1 your weapon's already dealing 1,000 damage, for instance. Because if it is, then why is it? Why at level 1 would a weapon be doing 1,000 damage? Why can't you start it off at 10, 100, whatever the case is? So I'm wondering, is it because they start us off really low and they want to have this giant gulf, an increase in power? Because the bigger that gulf, the more rapidly we obsolete old items. The lower the relative difference in power between items at 2 different levels, the more likely we are to hold on to older gear and not necessarily, the moment we level up, instantly replace our gear because everything is now obsolete. If, for instance, when I hit level 45, the minimum damage on a weapon would be 4,000, then my current weapon is instantly obsolete. Anything I find will automatically be better. I personally think a nice balance should be found in obsoleting items. Yes, as you level up, you do want to find upgrades. It feels good to find upgrades, but it also doesn't feel good to know I've hit 1 level up, all of my gear can instantly be replaced easily by the first thing that I find. And of course you can have exceptions for different items as well, right? But in general, right, is it going to be that if you find a legendary, maybe you can hold on to it for 10 levels? Maybe there's some items you can hold on to for 20, depending on what you're looking for on the item. We of course don't want a situation where you get gear at level 5 and you don't change your gear for 30 levels. But when you do find a really good item, you do want to be able to hold on to it at least for a while, feel like you got your money's worth out of it. Alright, so moving on here, legendary and unique items. We've made a foundational change to legendary items in Diablo 4 by allowing legendary powers to appear on multiple item slots. Now, if you're searching for a legendary power, like martial arts, which enhances the barbarian's kick ability, you may find it on rings, chest plates, or helmets. There's no need to hunt for a specific item type any longer. Now, the real question is, what happens when you find a power on an axe when you really wanted it on a ring? Or you found a great legendary amulet but can't use the power? Well, that is when we get to introduce our new friend, the occultist. Very cool dark art. The occultist can extract a legendary power from a legendary item, crystallizing it into essence while destroying the item in the process. That essence can then be implanted into another legendary item, overriding the power that was present in the item at that time. Essence material can also be stored and used at a later time. Unique items cannot be modified in this way, keeping their fantasies intact, and as their name implies, unique. Alright, so first off, uniques versus legendaries. Both item types are in the game as a little rehash. Unique items will always have the same affixes on them. They operate like Diablo 2 uniques. And legendary items are a bit like Diablo 3 legendaries, except they also have random legendary properties. So you can get that same legendary property on an amulet or a chest piece, what have you. Now, the new thing with the occultist is a little bit of the Horadric cube, or Kanai's cube rather, from Diablo 3, where you can extract a legendary power and then passively equip it. The difference here being that you are extracting the legendary power and turning it into an item, like a Ramalani's gift. It is a one-use item that you can then imbue into a weapon. It is consumed in the process, so it is like a one-time use extract. And so the example that they use here, we have the Pent-Up Axe, legendary axe slashing, damage per second. This is a level 43 item. It's a one-hander, so the damage is less. 1.1 attacks per second, fast weapon, crit strike damage, overpower damage, stun chance, Streggit, damage to slowed enemies, and then the legendary power, Fury Skills, barbarian item. Deal 4% more damage for every second you haven't used a Fury skill, up to 24%. So we then see here, boom, you extract it, and now you have the pent-up glowing essence of the pent-up Fury. And now we have allowed item types. This is where you can apply the essence, where you can imbue it. On the two-hander, we can see that the power is increased by 66%. This makes sense because you want to compensate for the fact that you are missing out on an offhand that could also have a legendary power. Then on amulet, the power is also increased. I'm not clear on why the power is increased there. I'm not sure whether it's always going to be amulet slots have increased power, or I'm not sure if it's just in the case of this particular legendary essence that it'll do more on an amulet. Then we have this example here of applying it to a rare. So, to clarify, this can be imbued upon another legendary or a rare item. It is possible to do it on rares. So, before adding the essence, this is what the item looked like. And now we'll talk about the difference between rare items and legendaries. Between magic and rare, magic items have 2 properties. Rares can have up to 5 properties, and then legendaries can only have up to 4 plus the legendary affix. So the distinction between rares and legendaries, rares can have up to 5 affixes. So for instance, let's say you were to find the Amulet of Pulling Whirlwind as a legendary amulet, but then you find a rare amulet that has 5 attributes that you want. You might even want to destroy or extract your Amulet of Pulling Whirlwind and imbue it onto your Bloody Choker here. But regardless, in this example, we have imbued. Whirlwind periodically pulls nearby enemies to you. So overall, this looks like it turns into a legendary item. For all intents and purposes, it seems the same, except you can see here the little imbued notification, which tells you this is not what the item was originally. Then the affix is 16% overpower damage, 6% damage while healthy, plus 4 max fury, 11% fury cost reduction. And again, requires level 44. So doing things this way actually solves a problem that the previous incarnation of legendaries posed to us, which was actually a stash nightmare. So imagine this power here, right? Whirlwind periodically pulls nearby enemies to you. If you are putting a build together and you know that you can put a legendary property in every single slot, and you know that you want this particular legendary property, then let's say you have 10 different itemization slots, right? Amulet, helm, chest, etc. Then in order to maximize your odds of being able to put together the build that you want, you're going to want to keep in reserve one version of every piece of gear that has this legendary affix on it. Because if I just keep the amulet, but then I get another amulet with another legendary property that I want, well, I can't equip both at the same time. If only I hadn't salvaged the helm that had this legendary property. So that would mean for every legendary property you can want, let's say there's 10 itemization slots, you'd have to keep 10 times 10, 100 items to play mix and match whenever you want it. This, however, being able to extract the essence and imbue it whenever you want completely solves that hoarding nightmare. All right, hunting for items. Very interesting change here. Each of these monsters seem to enjoy collecting certain types of items and will be somewhat more likely to drop those items than others. While bandits are fond of maces, crossbows, and boots, if you're hunting for a new pair of pants, you'd do well to kill some of the drowned instead. So, loot tables coming to the game in a different way than we've had them in Diablo before. Keywords here, somewhat more likely. So, let's say you are looking for a pair of boots. Well, you can choose to go find bandits to fight because they have somewhat more of a chance to drop boots. Let's say for argument's sake that's 25% better chance than the average monster to drop boots. So because it's only somewhat, if you really don't want to go farm bandits, you don't have to. It's only going to give you somewhat of an advantage. But if you do want to maximize your odds of getting those boots, those unique boots that you're chasing after, you go into whatever zone to farm bandits. What we don't want to happen in Diablo 4 is that players discover the optimum run to do. And so 99% of our time is spent killing these 3 bosses over and over, following this path, because that is the optimum XP and gear farming route. So incentivizing us without forcing us to go into different zones to do different things, I believe is the right kind of path to take. What I don't like is when you have hard loot tables like these boots will only drop from this boss, and so many items in the game are like that, such that you are forced to do the singular boss run over and over and over until you get the item that you want. Because while you can say that's encouraging you to do different activities, what it's really doing is restricting what you're gonna do. But this somewhat more likely, I like as an approach. Then over here, in past discussions, we've received feedback that it seems deflating for so much of a character's power to be delivered through the gear that they have equipped. For instance, in Diablo 3, you are nothing without your gear. If you take off all your gear, you can do literally nothing. No damage at endgame, that is. Nothing. In Diablo 2, if you are a spellcaster especially, if you don't have your gear on, you're still launching a level 20 fireball. It's not going to be a level 30 fireball, but it's a level 20 fireball. Customizing and planning a character feels less rewarding if it doesn't play a big role in how the character performs in combat. We hear you loud and clear, and in D4, we have placed a stronger emphasis on character power that is earned by all the little decisions you make while leveling up and exploring the world of Sanctuary. While we aren't talking about everything we have planned for character power today, I am happy to talk about one feature in particular, the Paragon Board. All right, now as we go into this, folks, I want you to keep an open mind, and I almost want to do a Control F and swap out every instance of the word Paragon here for a different word, because in naming it Paragon Board, a lot of people have gone into this with preconceived biases about the Diablo 3 Paragon system. And I do have to say, after reading this section, I am left with a greater number of questions than I have ever been left with. I feel there's a lot that really needs to be clarified here, because there's a number of assumptions that are being made because we don't have answers, and a lot of those assumptions are erring on the side of the D3 Paragon system. So moving forward, anytime I see Paragon, I'm going to instead try to say Prestige, just to dissociate and try to go into this with a completely open mind with no preconception. So, the Prestige Board. In Diablo 4, we have placed a heavy emphasis on build customization, ensuring that you can have plenty of control over how your hero grows. The Prestige Board unlocks for each class at level 50 and is a distillation of this focus. So, now we know that at least level 50 is the max level that you can reach is at least 50, possibly higher. Because again, we're not assuming this operates like Paragon in Diablo 3. In Diablo 3, Paragon unlocks once you reach max level. Nothing here yet suggests that that is how the Prestige Board works. So, for now, we've not been told what the max level is, and we've not been told this unlocks at max level. So let's assume nothing. And in assuming nothing, the null hypothesis here is that we go above level 50. And so you unlock the Prestige Board while you are still leveling up. Moving on, your hero begins their journey through the Prestige system at the central starting tile of their class's intro board. And from there, you make selections radiating outward. Once your hero reaches a gate tile, you'll choose, this is complicated, we're going to make it simple in a moment here, bear with me. A gate tile, you'll choose which new Prestige Board you would like to attach to at that location. The desired outcome is a personalized set of bonuses that will empower your hero and honor your dedication to their progression, that will remain fun to tweak and adjust over many playthroughs. There is a lot to take in with the image below, so I'll walk you through some aspects of what we're looking at here. Okay. Now, first thing to note, folks, this is not finalized art. This isn't art. They've not added the art, period, right? This is just, they're developing a system internally. So for themselves, for the game designers, they don't need to make it look pretty. They just need it to be functional. So this is just that bare bones functional thing. It's not going to look like this in the final iteration of the game. But you start over here, and then when they say tiles, every circle, every shape here is a tile. A board is the entire image, and these things in the corners, these are the gates. So the golden colored ones here, these are the ones that the player has unlocked. The gray ones are not yet unlocked, so you can see the path formed, right? And we'll refer back to this in a bit. So the Prestige Board is comprised of many fixed tiles. It's probably about 100 here or so. As the Barbarian earns experience, they will earn prestige points, which are used to unlock a connected tile. There are a few varieties of tiles that I want to walk through. So, as the Barbarian earns experience, they will earn prestige points. So, they're not saying it's tied to level ups. They have not yet spoken about Paragon level, like D3 has Paragon level. No mention of level here. You just earn points. At what rate? We don't know. Is there some limit to them? We don't know. Are they infinite? We don't know. So, the types of tiles. Normal tiles. These tiles are straightforward, providing a small but meaningful stat boost. Normal tiles are connective tissues that can be found throughout the board and are quite common. We're going to scroll down a bit here to explain what that would be. So this would be an example of a common tile +5 to strength. Also, yes, seeing any similarities to certain other games? Obviously there's some... Well, so first off, I mean, a lot of people think Path of Exile. The other example is actually predating Path of Exile by a lot, and that's Final Fantasy XII, I believe. That was the first, I believe, to really use a system like this. And using the grid pattern is actually far more Final Fantasy than it is Path of Exile. But regardless, there certainly is that going on there. Arguably even a little bit of Wolfson with how the nodes operate, but we'll continue going through this. Apart from the normal tiles, there are magic tiles. These are found in clusters throughout the board and provide a potent, more diverse set of benefits. As you might expect, they are less common than normal tiles, but still plentiful. So as you can guess, we're going from normal, magic, rare, and legendary. I like this nomenclature. It's instantly straightforward and understandable by having the same vocabulary, the same use of jargon as with the magic weapons, right? You have normal weapons, magic, rare, legendary, or items in general. Same thing with tiles. You're creating a language specific to the game that is easy to understand. Jargon is something that needs to be kept in check when developing a game. When you develop too much different jargon such that a sentence about the game contains so many words that a new player wouldn't have any ability to understand, I believe that is problematic. So again, we're keeping with a consistent and simple language here. This is not called a Nephilim tile, it's called magic, so I understand intuitively its power level relative to the other tiles. Noteworthy magic tiles are not pictured anywhere here as far as I can tell. I believe the yellow hexagons are meant to be the rare tiles, and the red circles we'll get to in a bit. But magic tiles are meant to be found in clusters, and we certainly don't see anything like that over here, as far as I can tell, unless I'm colorblind. So what is a magic tile plus 10% fire resistance? So resistances are back to percentages, folks. Then rare tiles offer significant boosts in power. Upon entering the prestige board for the first time, these represent great goals for players to chase, particularly once you've narrowed builds down towards highly specific goals. Rare tiles also have additional powers that unlock once the hero has raised an attribute to a sufficient level, requiring some choices to be made when plotting your path through the board. So, you might ask, why not just beeline towards all the rares? Why bother getting all these extras? Well, if all of these extras are things like +5 to strength, then when you unlock a rare here, our example is grants 10 fury per kill, but then requires this strength and this willpower, plus 8% increased max fury. So you can argue, well, if they make the unlock effect on rares tantalizing enough, then people will not just beeline for all the rares, but will bother to build up enough nodes in order to gain the max benefit from that rare. And then legendary tile. After the first prestige board, each new board has a single legendary tile that can be found at its center. Legendary tiles impart a new legendary power to the character that earns it. Example here is Warbringer. While your fury is above 50%, you deal 30% more damage. Glyphs and sockets. A socket is a special tile that can contain a glyph. Glyphs are items found throughout Sanctuary that, when embedded into a Paragon board, confer various benefits based upon the number of active tiles within their radius. Again, we're seeing a lot of parallels to what's been done in other ARPGs. Glyphs can also be leveled up by delving into some particularly dangerous dungeons. Leveling up a glyph extends the radius of their effect, allowing each one to draw power from or impart power to even more active tiles. So this is actually a hint at endgame activities that, okay, if you want to level up your glyphs, then you're doing some dangerous dungeons. And here's an example of a glyph progression. Radius size small, grants 30% bonus to all nodes within range. If we scroll back up here, that's what this is. So these are nodes within range. You would have a glyph in there, in these empty sockets. And it's unclear what the base range is, but it doesn't really matter, right? This is just to convey the general idea. So, coming back down here, if you level it up, here it's level 3. Now we've upgraded to a rare, or maybe we had a rare to begin with. Radius size medium. For every 10 dexterity purchased within range, you deal 13.5% increased damage to vulnerable targets. Grants 40.5% bonus to all nodes within range. That is pretty significant. These numbers, though, probably just placeholder numbers, right? There's always tuning that can be done. Let's focus on the spirit of what we're looking at here. So 10 dexterity purchase within range, meaning if 1, 2, 3 nodes have +5, +5, +5 dex, right? Well, then we're only up to 15, so we're only gaining the benefit of 1 of these upgrades, the 13.5% buff. Then here's a level 15, radius size large. For every 10 willpower purchased within range, you deal 31.5% increased overpower damage, and grants 4 strength for each willpower purchased within range. So this is basically converting willpower into strength, and even more so strength. So as a class who might not typically care about willpower, but cares a lot about strength, well, now you have reason to invest in willpower in your prestige board, because you can make that conversion. Then on to gate tiles and board selection. A single gate tile lies at each edge of the prestige board. As you progress through the prestige board, you will eventually reach a gate tile, which upon unlocking will allow you to select a new prestige board to attach to your existing board. Each of these boards has unique tile layouts, new magic and rare tiles, and a new legendary tile at the center. The prestige board is extended from these gate tiles. Upon selecting from the prestige board list, you will be able to place the board down, connecting it to the newly unlocked gate tile. You may also optionally rotate that newly placed board. We're hard at work on these and other features that we'll be able to share more about in future updates. Though for now, that's all from the systems team. Thanks for reading, and please share any feedback you have on social media, Reddit, and our forums. Okay, so let's dive into this. Some point of clarifications here. It does not appear that these prestige boards are randomly generated. These appear to be specifically handcrafted and curated. So there's going to be some finite number of these that exist. Perhaps more could be added, but there's not going to be an infinite number of prestige boards. It's not possible. We also know, again, your starter board for your class, you start in the middle, and then the other boards that you unlock, they are not the boards of other classes. We know that because there is a legendary at the center of them. Now, we don't know if every class is going to have its own unique set of prestige boards, or if any of them will be shared, but fundamentally that's not too important to the discussion here. It's also not clear whether or not you will be able to unlock a maximum of 4 additional prestige boards for a total of 5. That is 1 for every gate. Or if you can continue chaining prestige boards after prestige boards. So when I add this prestige board, do its other axes also become gates that can then unlock other prestige boards? So we don't know the answer to that currently. So let's scroll back up here and now, again, go through this system a bit. So we don't know the rate of acquisition of prestige points. We don't know whether there is a finite limit to how many you get, or whether it is infinite. We don't know if there's a finite number of prestige boards we can expand to, or whether it is infinite. So we'll discuss things along the paths of the different interpretations. So in theory, if there is no limit to how many prestige points you can get, then eventually you will be able to, with enough time, fill up everything. That, in my opinion, is not desirable, because if you get everything, then you're not making any significant choices. Now, that said, you can have a system with infinite progression, but make it so difficult to proceed beyond a certain point that, sure, if you played 8 hours a day for 10 years, you can fill up all your prestige boards. But it could be designed around such a way that the reasonable expectation is that the average player will not be able to acquire everything they could possibly want on every prestige board. That said, in such a system, you have to concern yourself about future-proofing. Yes, maybe today the average player will have tough choices to make and will not be able to get everything that they want, and will have to have an actual build in the prestige boards. But maybe after 5 years, maybe after incremental power creep, XYZ level increase, who knows, we're at a point where I'm filling up prestige boards. So by having a system that isn't infinite and doesn't allow for the possibility of, 10 years of grind filling up everything, then you can curtail that ahead of time. Another consideration is what's to stop a player from just beelining to a gate in order to unlock the legendary property, which seems very powerful. This seems undesirable, so we would need to do something that gates the gates. How are they going to do that? We don't know. There are ways to do it, however, right? These are problems that can be solved. So if we feel it's a concern that people will just beeline to the first legendary that they can get, make it that you must have invested, 20 points into one prestige board before you can activate a gate, for argument's sake. Another possible concern is, are we seeing too many of these? So let me clarify. First off, I like the idea of this system. I like that we have an actual deep system. I like that it's a new system of progression. I like that it's significantly more interesting than the Paragon system of D3. I do question whether it's overcorrected too much in the opposite direction, in that do we really need to have all of these nodes? Could this system work with it if it was just a quarter of this, right? If we take out a lot of the filler nodes and maybe we don't get these prestige points as often, but we focus more on those game changer nodes. Ultimately, it's difficult to say without knowing more, without seeing the system itself. I do like that it unlocks at level 50. Again, unclear whether that is endgame or not, but it's definitely not level 1. So I've always been of the mind of introduce depth gradually. Presumably it's going to take more than 8 hours to reach level 50 and unlock the prestige boards. So in doing so, you're avoiding scenarios where a new player comes to the game, opens up a prestige board and goes, whoa, I am overwhelmed. By the time you've unlocked prestige boards, you've got a firm grasp of the basics of the game. You're ready to tackle a system that has a bit more depth to it. Now, another of the many questions that I have about this system would be, how do we know, or is there a way for us to look at the other prestige boards? Because how do we plan our path through the prestige boards and onto the next if we cannot see until we reach a gate what is the next prestige board we want to do? Because we want to avoid a situation where the only way to plan your character is to rely on build guides, right? If there's no way for me to refund these easily, if there's no respecialization with the prestige boards, and I cannot see what the other prestige boards give me, I will not know whether I want to beeline straight to unlock a legendary. By the same token, though, do we want players to feel like they need to plan out 10 prestige boards before they begin investing their prestige points? I think another consideration is that we would hope that the boards remain interesting. If it's oftentimes just very simple, +5 strength, +5 intelligence, a little bit of fire resistance, a little bit of life, if the majority of the board is that, and we don't have enough really interesting nodes, which again, it's difficult to make any assumptions here without actually seeing things, then you run the risk of this feeling like a system that is more complex than it is fun or interesting. And so I use Path of Exile as the example here with regards to having their important nodes or tiles. They have some really significant game changers, things that will fundamentally change your build in a significant and impactful way. So for instance, they have Avatar of Fire. 50% of your physical, cold, and lightning damage is converted to fire damage, but you deal no non-fire damage, right? You would not just take this, right? It's not that everything that you take is an upgrade for you. If this is not good for your build, this is terrible for you if you deal no non-fire damage. Another one, Blood Magic, removes all mana. Skills cost life instead of mana. Skills reserve life instead of mana. spend life instead of mana for effects of skills. So again, game changer. If you weren't building towards this, if you didn't want this, again, it's a powerful effect if you're building for it, but if you're just going for whatever because, oh, it's a rare node or, it's a fancy node, I want to take it, well, it could potentially break your character. Now, again, overall, I do like the concept of the system. I do think there are things that we want to avoid happening, and that's what happens with D3's Paragon system. Again, I'm trying to not make the assumptions that it's going to operate that way, but one thing that I do not like about D3's Paragon system is that it is infinitely scaling power. Again, we don't know whether we can have infinite prestige points here. We don't know the rate of acquisition, but we know that in the case of Diablo 3, every Paragon gives you a bit more power, and so the end game is about farming up Paragon, because it is virtually limitless. There technically is a Paragon limit, but practically there is no Paragon limit, such that over the course of 3 months, someone that has farmed Paragon for 3 months straight versus someone who has not will be vastly more powerful. But if we look at this instead not as a separate endgame progression system and look at it as a progression system that unlocks maybe max level is 99 like in Diablo 2, maybe it unlocks midway through your leveling, and this upgrades your character tangentially at the same time as you are leveling up your skills and your base level and all that. Alright, I think that about covers that. Overall, I think there's a lot of promise in here, lots and lots of unanswered questions, the answers of which could potentially make me hate the system, but again, if I'm trying to be as charitable as possible in my interpretation of things, I think there's a lot of promise here. Maybe some tweaking, but ultimately, we're playing an RPG, we like progression systems, we like building up our characters. This is a way to build up power for our character that is outside of gearing. Alright, on to the next section, visual effects in Diablo 4. As we talk through these, we're going to toss up the videos that they have embedded here. VFX is an integral part of the combat experience for all Diablo games. With Diablo 4, we wanted to step up the fidelity of our effects using physically based rendering, PBR, as well as better support the core pillars of gameplay, deep hero customization, itemization, and combat readability. Visual effects philosophy. Every effect plays a role in the final composition of our game. It is important to understand the context of an effect and how it best serves your experience. One of our core values at Blizzard is gameplay first, and this drives a lot of the artistic decisions we make while developing VFX for the game. Moment-to-moment gameplay is the focal point within the composition of Diablo 4. It should draw your attention. To achieve this, we must consider things like player skills, monster telegraphs, traps, damage areas, and character states. The visual effects for each of these components must be readable in all areas and lighting conditions, so you can quickly understand what is happening and use that information to make informed decisions. In the chaos of combat, you'll need to be smart. Seeing a legendary item drop is exciting, but picking it up is not as important as reacting to a monster's attack that can one-shot hardcore characters. Our goal is to balance the primary, secondary, and tertiary reads to help you understand what is happening. To do this, we reserve visually loud effects for powerful skills, like ultimate abilities, while weaker skills meld into the background. Each class has abilities that range from low to high in costs, cooldowns, and power. In tandem, classes have a range of visual intensity that increases with skill power. There's so many little things that go into making a game that I think the average person doesn't consider, because a lot of these are things that you don't notice when they're done well. You notice when they're not done well, but you generally can't pinpoint why something doesn't feel right or doesn't feel good. Combat improvements. To enhance the feel of combat, we have made several improvements to the way damage is applied in our game. In previous iterations of Diablo, an AoE or melee skill would be a single area of damage that is applied on a single frame. Thanks to our gameplay engineers, we can now animate target areas, what we call payloads, over multiple frames, which allow us to line up the animated target areas with the animated VFX that play out. So in short, basically what they're saying in these sections is that when you attack in Diablo 4, your hit effects will more closely match your actual character animation. So instead of an attack animation literally just being an animation and then some damage applied, it's going to feel more cohesive, it's going to feel more responsive, it's going to feel more visceral, because now damage isn't just being dealt in some area in front of you, it's being dealt specifically where your weapon is swinging, for instance. Seeing it in action in the video really brings home the point. And I think the one thing that Diablo 3 does better than any other ARPG is the visceral feel of combat, and it looks like they're just ramping that up to the next level in Diablo 4. Reading on here, additionally we have revamped the way we apply hit effects to monsters, so impacts flow with the direction of a spell or melee attack. We use data defined in the animation and animated target area to find the most accurate place to hit a monster, and where to apply a directional physics force to the ragdoll. In so few words, if you hit a goatman in the knee, the blood spray would come from his knee. The physics force applied to the goatman's knee would send it flying as if you kicked the legs out from under him. This is the kind of AAA polish that adds and contributes to the overall experience of a game. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, who cares about this stuff? The core game needs to be good. Yes, evidently the core game needs to be good. But if you can have a good core game and these extras as well, this is what makes for a next-gen game. Visual effects, casting, and receiving light. Basically, they start talking about how in Diablo 3, when you cast a spell, it doesn't matter whether you're in the dungeon or outside, that spell's going to look the same. But in Diablo 4, because they're going for more realistic effects, they want even their spell effects to respond to the environment's lighting, but they can't make it 100% because then, you know, a fire in broad daylight is actually a pretty dim and unimpressive looking thing, so they are basing themselves on physical-based rendering, but also allowing artists to come in and adjust things where necessary to produce the best effect. So they're aiming for a healthy balance of gameplay clarity and thematic immersion. Then dynamic player skills. Choices should affect more than your character's stats. Once we have a class skill we are happy with, the VFX team adds the ability for developers to dynamically change the size, intensity, and duration of a skill. The visual intensity of a skill will increase as you stack upgrades and items that increase the power of that ability. This is a cool, nice addition. So not only do we have points that'll make a skill more mechanically powerful, but we will see that also represented with the visuals of the skills. A level 1 fireball will not look as impressive as a level 20 fireball. And each of these changes is handcrafted by an artist to ensure the art holds up at all supported sizes and intensities. Lots of really cool examples. And then weapons are built in a way that we can easily apply weapon buffs, like elemental effects. Then there's a section on skill-driven deaths. They have a system that allows us to decapitate, bisect, freeze, shatter, eviscerate, and burn enemies. Just to give a few examples, this is like Mortal Kombat fatalities. I love this. This is so cool. They've actually built in the bone structure and muscular structure of every enemy. So underneath the skin, there's a muscle layer. Underneath that, there's a bone layer, so that we can see all these gory effects when we kill these guys. As we fight enemies, if we're close to enemies, we're gonna get covered in blood spatter as we damage them. The blood spatter kind of slowly transitions away over time. Then different classes might have unique ways to perform their fatalities on enemies. So the sorceress can freeze or shatter frozen monsters into pieces. She can use lightning to singe a corpse. She can use fire to scorch a monster's flesh, leaving a charred skeleton. The barbarian can flatten a monster under the weight of a heavy object, can decapitate a monster, can cut a monster in half, can shatter the lower limbs of a monster. The rogue can spill the insides of a monster just to get their guts hanging out. The rogue can use shadow energy to deteriorate the life from a monster's flesh. The rogue could use poison to melt a monster's skin off, or could also flay the skin from an enemy. The druid could crush a monster with a moving object, like a rolling boulder, leaving a smear of blood on the ground. He could eat the flesh of a monster away while in shapeshift form. He can use lightning to explode a monster. He can maul a monster's skin. Again, these are all little extra touches that just go into that AAA polish. At the end of the day, the game itself has to be fun. The core gameplay, the combat, needs to be fun to motivate all the other game systems. Now again, this just continues to feed off of the thought that everything that we're seeing from Diablo 4 outside of game mechanics seems unquestionably great. And not to say that the game mechanics seem bad, but that's the place where people have the most questions, the most concerns. It's always difficult to fully understand the scope of these things without having a comprehensive understanding of all the mechanics in the game, all the endgame activities, all the game systems. We're always looking at just very close-up views of a giant painting. And so it's difficult, like what am I looking at? I'm looking at something and when you take a step back, you see it's a belt buckle. But looking at it so close, you just see some brushstrokes and you're not too sure how that fits into the bigger painting. But again, we've seen some pretty clear indications that over the years, throughout these updates, they have been listening to the feedback from the community. So do give your feedback on the update. If you don't like the big numbers, let's hope that we can get some philosophical discussion from the devs on why they're choosing to have those big numbers. Let's hope we get some more answers in the future on this, the Paragon Board, we'll call it by its proper name. But overall here, I think this was an exciting update. I think we're seeing steps taken in the right direction. There's always tuning that can be done. But I do like this core idea of this progression system that it is almost like Diablo 4's version of the passive skill tree as seen in Path of Exile or Wolcen. And that's going to wrap up this video, but do be sure to have checked out our previous video on the last quarterly update and leave your thoughts on this update in the comments. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more Diablo content.